Hey everyone, I'm Chef Antonia Lofaso. I am the head judge of the Julia Child Challenge, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make the classic, iconic French onion soup. What I love so much about Julia Child's teachings are this fundamental, foundational cooking, and soup is one of those recipes. I always love to say that great cooks and great chefs really take the time to develop flavor in a soup. And this is a recipe that takes a little bit longer, but I advocate for those recipes because there's a lot of pride and a lot of learning techniques that go into making recipes that sometimes take a little bit longer. What I love so much about this recipe is that very, very simple and very few ingredients, but it's all about technique. And it's all about kind of just taking your time in the kitchen. Just enjoy the process of cooking because it's about the care and the technique that's gonna go into caramelizing these onions, which is the foundation of this iconic soup. Okay, so let's get into caramelizing onions. So I've got a Dutch oven. I'm just gonna heat on a medium to start, and I'm gonna lower it because the onions are gonna go low and slow. So I'm gonna take some unsalted butter and oil. So we're gonna just kind of let that melt, and it doesn't need to go all the way. The butter is going to melt at its own pace, and that's fine. And we're just gonna dump in all of those onions. Now, this looks like a lot of onions, but think about this. Onions have a ton of water, and this is gonna cook down. I like to salt at the very beginning. A lot of recipes will tell you, and in classic caramelization of onions, they would say don't cover it. Don't steam the onion, okay? You want this to go on its own. I like to give it a little bit of a cover so that it can steam, and then I'll pull the cover off and then allow the onions to caramelize more on their own. So it's just a little trick to have the process go a little bit faster, because if you just start these onions here and let them go low and slow, it does take about 45 minutes. If we cover it, it's probably gonna take about 20. Now what I'm gonna do is add a couple of sprigs of thyme. So I'm just gonna cover this and let it cook for about 20 minutes. I'm gonna continuously stir it so that there's no sticking to the bottom. I'm gonna have it on a low to slightly medium heat, but I wanna get that steam started, and then we'll get into the caramelization. All right, so I've taken the lid off of the onions, and you can see they've almost reduced in volume by 3/4. The onions are nice and soft. They're starting to get a little bit of caramelization happening. I'm gonna add a little bit of sugar now. This kind of helps the browning process. A little bit more salt. In order to really have the caramelization be even over all the onions, as it gets to the point where it starts to really brown, you wanna move the onions around so that they are equally caramelized. All right, the onions are exactly where we want them. They are beautifully caramelized, evenly caramelized, and now we can get into adding a little bit of flour. And the flour is just going to thicken the soup just a tad. And I'm just gonna give the flour a second to touch the heat of the pan, okay? Really, really important to always cook out flour because you can taste raw flour if it doesn't come in contact with a little bit of fat and some heat. We're gonna add some cognac and a dry white wine, and then we have the beef broth. A super, super simple soup, but all of the right ingredients done well, technique, the classics, and you've got a beautiful soup. So I'm gonna turn this up to a medium. We're gonna let it simmer. We're just gonna cover this loosely. We're gonna allow the water to evaporate, okay, so that there is a concentration of the soup that's gonna happen, but not so much to where the entire lid is off. We want this process to be low and slow. So just enough for there to be the evaporation of water. It happens too quickly when you have the entire top off. Okay, so the soup has been cooking for about 90 minutes. It is now time to build the soups. I want to remove those stems of thyme that were in there, like that. This is where the question comes, right? How much cheese do you put into your French onion soup? If you're someone like me, I am like all the cheese that can fit. So good. I can smell the thyme. That really beautiful earthy thyme, the beef broth. Oh, so good. And you look at those onions, right? At the very, very beginning, so many onions. And now they're just these gorgeous caramelized little soft strings of sweetness. I've got bread already toasted off. Toast them very, very well. It'll really help with the sturdiness. And I kind of like to do a little 2 pieces of bread. The bread and the cheese are kind of my favorite. It's gonna sit on top. It's gonna absorb. We want it to. And we've got the Gruyere. You want all the bread covered here because this is gonna broil, and you really wanna make sure that the bread is covered so that that doesn't get too dark. Now we're gonna broil these. These are warm because they came right out of the broiler. Look at that. What I like to do, right, is kind of push that bread. The bread got nice and charred. That's the cheese pull that we're talking about. Look at that. The payoff is that beautiful cheese as it pulls. It's so creamy. There's a great sort of sourness and funkiness to the Gruyere that works so well with the sweetness of those onions. I'm going in for another bite. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this recipe, but more importantly, I hope that you embrace the fundamentals of cooking, bringing it back to the classics and enjoying the classics, just like Julia did.